Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a 12-team PPR mock draft from the first overall spot using FantasyPros Draft Wizard. The roster positions for today's mock are 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, 2 flex spots, a kicker defense, and 5 bench spots. We're going to be drafting up against the ESPN ADP, NFL.com ADP, and the Sleeper ADP in today's video. But before we can get on into this 12-team PPR mock draft from the first overall spot, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into this 12-team PPR mock draft from the first overall spot. Now, if you are entering into your draft and you already know that you have the 101 pick, you're the first overall, you're the head of the table, shout out Roman Reigns, then you should come into the draft knowing who you are going to pick, whether that is Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, or Tyreek Hill. In my opinion, those are the 3 guys in consideration for the first overall pick. Now, if you asked me a couple of days ago, it was basically a no-brainer to select Christian McCaffrey at the 101. Christian McCaffrey is so good that he can score 60, 70, 80, even 100 plus points more than the running back number 2, which is what happened last season. But now Christian McCaffrey is currently dealing with a calf strain and is unlikely to suit up for any preseason game. I don't think McCaffrey would have played in any preseason games anyways. He is also expected to miss a couple of weeks of practice. Now, does this make me feel 100% confident in Christian McCaffrey, the fact that he's dealing with an injury right now? The answer to that would be no. And if we are getting closer and closer to knocking on the door of the season, and I'm the number 1 overall pick, and Christian McCaffrey is still banged up, he's not practicing, then I am going to start to panic, right? But at the same time, in the back of my head, I realized that fading Christian McCaffrey, even with this calf strain injury, could be the reason why I end up losing my league, right? Instead of taking the surefire running back 1, I overthink things and I go a different way. So right now, I am going to lean with Christian McCaffrey. My opinion on this situation is definitely fluid. It is something that I can change as we get deeper into August or even into early September, assuming he's able to log some full practices later on in August. I'm not going to worry. But right now, I get if you're doing your home league draft or your draft with your friends from your office or your college buddies, then sure, maybe I might think of going a different way, but right now, I'm still going to lean with Christian McCaffrey. This dude is just too good to fade. Again, if the injury continues to linger, yes, there's reason to get worried, but as of right now, I am not panicking too much. So after we went ahead and drafted Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Breece Hall, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan Robinson, A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, as well as Puka Nacua. The second round opens with Jahmyr Gibbs, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyron Williams, Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams, Drizzy Drake London, Isaiah Pacheco, Brandon Ayuk, Sam Laporta, and Travis Etienne. We have addressed the Brandon Ayuk narrative recently. At this point, it is still kind of just 50-50 on if he ends up being a 49er or if he ends up getting traded. The rumors are just there's just so many rumors out there. There's, oh, he's going to be back with the 49ers. They're going to offer him this contract. Oh, the Steelers actually are unwilling to give up a 2nd or 3rd round pick. Or, oh, maybe he's looking at these other teams, right? There are so many rumors out there. If I was doing my real draft right now, I probably would be just avoiding Debo, Brandon Ayuk, because Debo Samuel would be a complete and utter steal at the 2.12 if Brandon Ayuk was gone. But if Brandon Ayuk is there, then I reached in a huge way, in my opinion. So looking at the best players available right now, all of the quarterbacks are available. Only one tight end gone in Sam Laporta. It feels like the top end tight ends are creeping into the end of the second round. Josh Allen, you might see come off the board at the end of the second round as well. Looking at the running backs, Devin Achane, Rashad with 2 A's White, Alvin Kamara. Wide receivers, we got Chris Olave, Michael Pittman Jr., Jalen Waddle, as well as Mike Evans. I am going to go ahead here and go with a running back and a wide receiver. Typically from the number 1 overall spot, a lot of the times you may not be able to get a guy like Achane at the end of the second round if this is a more running back heavy draft, and we have seen a bunch of running backs come off the board. But the upside to me with Achane is way too significant for me not to draft him. This is a guy that can score 30 plus fantasy points in any given game. And if I draft Devon Achane and I pair him with Christian McCaffrey, I could have the most deadly duo at the running back position in the league. Two guys that can combine for 50 plus points for me, which is going to be a huge advantage at the running back position. I project the Dolphins to be very solid on offense yet again, and I think at the end of the second round, early third round, you should be heavily considering him, even though there's going to be people talking about how he is more of a risky pick. I get, is Devon Achane like the condom wrap over your team? I don't think so, but the upside to me greatly outweighs the risk. At wide receiver here, if you want to go safe, I think Nico Collins is pretty safe. I think Mike Evans is pretty safe. Cooper Kupp is pretty safe. Like, Cooper Kupp is screaming up draft boards because of the fact that Puka Nacua is banged up. Obviously, we know how much injuries can affect wide receivers or running backs. That's another scenario, just like with Christian McCaffrey, where I'm kind of just waiting to see what happens before I make some absurd take like, hey, don't draft Puka Nacua or don't draft Christian McCaffrey, because if the guys show up to practice soon-ish, then there really isn't any need to worry. So here we're to go with Chris Olave. Now, Chris Olave is a guy that I was previously very off of for fantasy football. His connection with Derek Carr last year was incredibly lackluster, and honestly, that combo was complete and utter dog shit. Derek Carr would throw the ball and it would hit the back of Chris Olave's helmet. He would miss Chris Olave, who was wide open, and it was honestly just a very frustrating watch if you drafted Chris Olave. But Derek Carr did tend to look better towards the end of last season, and maybe the offseason of working together with Chris Olave and Derek Carr will help Chris Olave a ton. In terms of talent, Chris Olave is immensely talented. The only question mark is, will Chris Olave be getting valuable targets from Derek Carr? Will Derek Carr be able to actually hit him when he's open? And that is still something that is up in the air. But in the third round, to me, I get, again, he's a little bit more risky than a guy like Mike Evans, than a guy like Cooper Kupp, but I am still going to go ahead and take that upside swing on Chris Olave, because when Chris Olave has that season where he is able to catch the ball, where the ball is being thrown his way correctly, this is a guy that can finish as a top 3 wide receiver due to his talent. If Chris Olave wasn't available, right, his ADP is pick 22, he doesn't make it to you at pick 25, then I would have ended up going with Mike Evans, or if I didn't have Achane, I'd be a little bit more interested in Jalen Waddle. Would also consider Cooper Kupp, Nico Collins, DJ Moore at that pick. And to be honest with you, starting triple running back feels incredibly risky in a league like this where you can start 4 wide receivers at all time. And if I'm being honest with you, even in a league where it's just 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 1 flex, I'm not going robust running back and drafting 3 running backs off the rip. I do, though, kind of wonder what my team would look like if I drafted Travis Kelce here and then started to take the wide receivers a little bit later. Now, Travis Kelce is a guy that I believe will finish as the tight end number 1. I think last year, the fact that he came into the year injured and the fact that the team was kind of limp dick early on, and then they had that Viagra moment in the playoffs, and they're just beating down on these teams. I think Travis Kelce is still the best tight end in the NFL, but since we went double running back early, the fact that we don't have one wide receiver yet is going to sway me away from Travis Kelce. But if you wanted Kelce, you want that tight end positional advantage, which is huge. Go right ahead and take him. But I think in the 4th, the 5th round, we'll be able to get a tight end that I feel pretty confident in as well. I do think in a vacuum, Travis Kelce is a lot safer than Chris Olave, but only having 0 wide receivers through the first 3 rounds feels very, very risky in my opinion. So we're going to go ahead and take Mr. Chris Olave at that pick. So we start off with McCaffrey, A-Chain, and Chris Olave. After Olave, Travis Kelce, Josh Allen, Mike Evans, Patrick, Kermit the Frog, Mahomes, Josh Jacobs, Rashad with 2 A's, White, Michael Pittman Jr., Nico Cousin, Let's Go Bowling, Collins, Deebo Samuel, Jalen Hurts, Stephon Diggs. The 4th opens with James Cook, Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker III, Wiki, DJ Moore, Lamar Jackson, Cooper Kupp, Jalen Waddle, Alvin Kamara, Devontae Smith, Malik Neighbors, and DK Metcalf. Now, I have been someone that has been glazing Malik Neighbors all summer. Malik Neighbors plays in his first preseason game. The guy's getting open left and right. If you were just watching the game and you were staring at Malik Neighbors, it would have been one of the most frustrating watches you've ever had because the guy was separating from the DBs incredibly quickly. When it was in zone, he found the space in the zones. He was standing wide open, and Horsecock Lock just never gave him the ball. Hopefully, Daniel Jones has enough brain cells to throw the ball to Malik Neighbors, because what that game showed us is that Malik Neighbors is going to be very reliable as long as he gets the targets thrown his way because of how open he was. And Malik Neighbors, to me, is a smash in the 4th round, and I think his ADP might move up even further. So now we are back up on the clock here. Best quarterback is Anthony Richardson. Tight ends, Trey McBride, Mark Andrews. At the wide receiver position, Amari Cooper, Christian Kirk, Zay Flowers, T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, Tank Dell. Tank Dell scored in the preseason game yesterday up against the Steelers. If you guys watched that game, they panned to Stephon Diggs on the sideline. It looked like he was just talking to CJ Stroud, but everyone on Twitter's like, look, it's the same shit as in Buffalo. He's yelling at CJ Stroud. Maybe he was, honestly. Again, I'm not going to put myself in that situation, but I'm a huge fan of Tank Dell. I think he'll end up being the number 2 target on the team, and I think he has a solid chance of potentially even being the numero uno target. Now, Amari Cooper right now does feel kind of risky, right? Because if the Cleveland Browns were to trade for Brandon Ayuk, that would certainly knock down the value of Amari Cooper, because Amari Cooper is the clear number 1 option in this offense right now, right? They bring in Jerry Jeudy, who has never really done jack shit in the NFL compared to how we projected him out of college. They have David Njoku, sure, but at the wide receiver position, guys like Elijah Moore, just not really talented guys. So Amari Cooper is going to feast in targets. If they bring in Brandon Ayuk, I think that would definitely knock Amari Cooper down a peg. Trey McBride here in the 4th round, I simply cannot resist it. Trey McBride, I understand, wasn't insane in the membrane in his first year last season, right? We didn't see Trey McBride in technically his sophomore season, but if you look back at 2022, the guy's barely being used at all. Sure, he had that one big game up against the Atlanta Falcons in Week 17, but last year was his first year really being the guy, and we saw the big games out of him. The consistency was a little bit suspect, but I do believe with Kyler Murray being more healthy entering into the 2024 NFL season, the fact that he's not coming off of a terrible injury, to me, makes me feel very confident in Trey McBride. I think he's a great red zone threat. I think they'll be able to move the ball very effectively with Kyler, James Conner, Trey Benson, Trey McBride, and obviously Maserati Marv is going to add a lot to this offense. It's going to make them a lot better. I believe heavily in Kyler Murray, and anytime Trey McBride falls deep into the 4th round, I feel obligated to take him. Now, if he wasn't available, I probably would have taken a wide receiver and then swung back at the tight end position with either Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid, or Kyle Pitts. Frankly, my ranking of Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid, and Kyle Pitts changes every single day. I flip them around in my head. The rankings will be available on the Patreon very, very shortly. We're just working out a few kinks, and then they're going to go up on there, and the Patreon is in the video description of today's video. I'm going to put it in the video description. So we're going to go ahead and snag Trey McBride here. So now we're up again I love me some Anthony Richardson, but we take Anthony Richardson in virtually every single fucking video. All these mock drafts, we've been taking them. So what I've decided to do is kind of just put a ban on them, right? Because if I was doing 10 drafts, I don't want to draft Anthony Richardson in all 10 drafts, right? I'd feel confident drafting him in 3 or 4, right? Anthony Richardson has some injury concern, which does kind of scare me. But as you get deeper and deeper into your draft, you want to be taking a lot more risks. And Anthony Richardson's risk, sure, he got banged up a bunch last season. He was out for the rest of the season. But this guy was putting defenses into the fucking figure 4. He was juking guys out of their cleats. He was juking them and then running underneath their legs, tying their cleats up. They'd fall over and he'd run past them, right? The guy is incredibly fast. He's like the Flash. He's like Lightning McQueen. I think that the upside of Anthony Richardson heavily outweighs the risk. But I'm not going to sit here and just take Anthony Richardson every video. I try to do different things in these videos because if you're doing mock drafts, just doing the exact same thing every single time, once you get to your draft, it's draft night, you had a couple brewskis, maybe you don't drink, maybe you smoked a little, maybe you didn't smoke, maybe you're stone cold sober, and you sit there, and then guess what? You don't get the guy you wanted to come to you in the 3rd round that you drafted every single time. Then you're going to panic. Be like, what do I do? And then you're going to make these terrible decisions. So when you're doing these mock drafts, and when I do these mock drafts, I'm practicing doing different things in every single draft. So this time, we are going to go ahead and go... Oh, dude, is Tank Dell... They're going to be like, Nick, that's a reach. You can't take Tank Dell in the 5th round. Because, like, look, Christian Kirk, he's the wide receiver 1 in Jacksonville. Dude, there's so much upside with Tank Dell. But the problem is, with Tank Dell being your wide receiver 2, it is a little bit more risky than a guy like Christian Kirk, a guy like Zay Flowers, these guys that are clear number 1 receivers on their team. Amari Cooper, obviously, assuming that Brandon Ayuk doesn't get traded there. But we cannot make assumptions right now because we don't really know. So we'll go ahead and go with Zay Flowers this time. Zay Flowers was a guy that really came in hot towards the end of last season. Zay Flowers was really putting together some solid games, 23 points, 20, 22, 19. Sure, he had 1 game in between that up against the Jaguars where he only scored 1 fucking point, which obviously is terrible. But this guy was significant upside in the playoffs. He was playing very good for the team. Obviously, he made that mistake in the Chiefs game that kind of sold them the game in a way, but Zay Flowers is clearly the best receiver on that team. I guess you could argue maybe Mark Andrews is technically the safer target for Lamar Jackson, but Zay Flowers has speed. He's a guy that is able to get frequently open, and I think in his 2nd year, he's not going to slump. He's going to have that 2nd year breakout season. After Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Aaron Jones, James Conner, Tank Dell, CJ Stroud, Amari Cooper, George Kittle, Timbers, Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts. Oh, what the fuck? I don't, if you guys are just listening, you wouldn't have seen what just happened there, but Evan Ingram, George Pickens, T. Higgins, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Anthony Richardson, Keenan Allen, Kyler Murray, David Montgomery, Chris Godwin, Joe Shiesty, DeAndre Swift, and Ramondre Stevenson. Now, deep down, I was really hoping that Kyler Murray would swing back to us. Now, I don't think stacking is crucial in a redraft league, but I would have been ecstatic to get the Kyler Murray, Trey McBride stack, 2 guys that I believe in very heavily. I like Zamir White a ton, but in this kind of a league format, I don't feel as though I would benefit from having a 3rd running back. Now, obviously, the question mark with CMC's health could move you that way, but when I draft Christian McCaffrey 101 overall, my assumption is he's fully healthy. He's going to be good to go for week number 1. Because if that doesn't happen, then I'm probably cooked. So Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Rashee Rice. I'm starting to hop on the Rashee Rice bandwagon. I'm starting to think that this man might not get suspended at all. I'm starting to think that Rashee Rice might be scot-free. He might not get suspended until next season. His court date isn't until December, and the NFL typically doesn't throw the ban hammer down. They typically don't lock the guy up, Akon style, I'm locked up, don't let me out, right? They typically don't lock him up and throw away the key before we actually get the sentencing from a real judge, right? The NFL, today, Junior, I don't know why I just fucking started like that, but they wait for what the court system does before they make a ruling typically. So if Rashee Rice plays the whole season as the number 1 receiver in Kansas City, which I believe he is, The upside is very high here. I know we've been sucking off the upside all video, but I really like that with Rashee Rice. And then we're going to go ahead and draft another receiver to match with that. We'll go with a little bit of a safer bet here, and that is going to be Deontay Johnson. Now, I like Terry McLaurin just as much as everyone, but Terry McLaurin's a guy that we have drafted millions of times over and over, and he kind of always lets us down. Now, he's never so much of a bust to where you drafted him and you're pulling your hair out, but he never really finds any consistency. You could blame the quarterback play for his whole entire career. He has had some schlubs throwing him the ball. Maybe Jaden Daniels is the messiah for the Commanders, the messiah for Terry McLaurin, and I wouldn't bet against that in the 7th round. But I'm going to go with another quarterback that's a little bit sus, but that's Deontay Johnson. I have seen so much positivity for Bryce Young out of training camp, so much positivity that the new system in Carolina is going to heavily benefit Bryce Young, and he's not going to look like a complete and utter sack of shit like he looked like last season. So I am someone that has been a Deontay Johnson truther since his rookie year in Pittsburgh, and I'm going to continue to ride that bandwagon. And I really do think that the Carolina Panthers aren't going to magically do a complete 180 and be one of the best teams in the NFL, one of the best offenses, but I do think that Deontay Johnson will be the #1 receiver there. We haven't seen the most positive reports about Xavier Legette. Sure, they still have old man Adam Thielen, who was relatively consistent last year, at least early on in the season, where he was just destroying for your fantasy team. Like, if you had Adam Thielen last year, if you drafted him, then you were sitting pretty. The guy was amazing, and then he fell off, obviously. But if Deontay Johnson can stay consistent and be that #1, that first read for Adam Thielen, then Deontay Johnson could finish as a very reliable wide receiver 2 weekly, and we've got him as our 4th wide receiver. So after Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, Rome Odunze, Raheem Mostert, Zamir White, Jaden Riley Reed, David Njoku, Jonathan Brooks, Najee Harris, Hollywood Brown, Christian Watson, Brock Bowers, Tony Pollard, Brian Robinson, the Niners defense, Jordan Addison Ray, Jalen Warren, Austin Eckler, Xavier Worthy, JSN, Keon Coleman, Nick Chubb, and Cleveland Browns defense. I was looking to match up the 2 best drivers in the NFL together, Jordan Addison and Rashee Rice. Could have named my team fucking Fast and Furious or something, even though that joke probably isn't all that funny to you guys. But we're back up on the clock here. Looking at the quarterback position, Dak is available, Jordan Love. So it's either going to be a quarterback, running back, or wide receiver at this pick. That's what it's going to be. And we have 2 picks back to back here, like the cover of Lethal Weapon. So we can go with 2 of those guys, right? So I think the smart decision would be taking a quarterback, because by the time things come back around, look, I like Jared Goff, I like Caleb Williams, but there's just something about feeling a little bit safer with a Dak or Jordan Love. Now, there is the CeeDee Lamb contract situation where Jerry Jones is like, oh, I'm not too worried about that. And then CeeDee Lamb retweets the tweet and is like, lol, which means like there's a bit of trouble in paradise in Dallas. But I do really think that the deal will get done, so I'm not really too worried about that. Dak Prescott is a relatively reliable quarterback for fantasy football. He does have some rushing upside. He's going to be very consistent for you throughout the fantasy football season and has that top 3, top 5 upside weekly. Now, if you're shooting for a little bit more upside, maybe you wait until a little bit later, you draft Caleb Williams, you pair him with maybe Jaden Daniels, and one of these rookie sensations becomes this year's CJ Stroud. But I do think that Dak Prescott feels like a relatively safe pick with some decent high ceiling weekly. And when you have CeeDee Lamb on your team, it makes it pretty easy for you, right? When you just throw the ball up to CeeDee Lamb and he's always going to catch it. Again, assuming, and you know what they say about assumptions, they make an ass out of you and me, assuming that he's back there, obviously. So looking at the board here, it's going to be either running back or wide receiver. And to me, there is kind of a fall off that is beginning here. After Javonte Williams, there's a lot more question marks, right? Tajay Spears probably going to be the #2 to start at the season, but he could be the #1. Devin Singletary has the other running backs behind him, Tyrone Tracy, Zach Moss, seemingly the running back 1 in Cincinnati. but they also have Chase Brown, right? Javonte Williams, sure, they have Jaleel McLaughlin, but I do think Javonte Williams, in terms of skill, is the best there, and I think the Denver Broncos situation with Sean Payton is very beneficial. This is a solid system to get a running back there to be very successful. Javonte Williams last season, sure, he was a complete and utter dud, and I was pretty hands-offish with Javonte Williams last season. If you watch my videos, I wasn't whipping out the carpet so I can get down on my knees and give this guy the gawk 9,000 special and fondle his balls or something, right? I was telling you guys that Javonte Williams, a little bit risky with that injury. He comes back, he gets a lot of touches, but he isn't as effective. I think this season, if he's given the correct workload, and obviously he's probably not going to be the third down back all time for the team because they've got Jaleel McLaughlin, but I do think that Javonte Williams is very talented. Coming out of college, he was amazing. He looked pretty decent for the first couple of years. Last year, obviously coming off the injury, wasn't the best, but I think this is the correct time to buy him because his ADP is in the 9th round, right? There's very little risk as you get deeper and deeper into the draft with these selections, right? If Javonte Williams ends up not being the guy, right? Maybe they come out week 1 and Audric Estime is the running back one, right? Then after 2 weeks, if Javonte's just chilling, not doing anything, then you can cut bait, right? It's a lot harder to cut bait with, for instance, if Chris Olave is a complete and utter disaster, you're probably never going to be able to cut him because you're just going to hold on to him for dear life because he was your 3rd round pick. After Javonte Williams, Tajay Spears, Zach Moss, Ladd McConkey, DeAndre Hopkins, back-to-back injured wide receivers coming off the board, and Jim Harbaugh is pissing me off, man. Give us an injury update. He basically just dances around on the podium, right? He dances around the questions. Hey, how's Justin Herbert the pervert doing? Blah, 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 blah. And he just rambles on. Tell us what the fuck's going on there, right? It's very annoying. Brian Thomas Jr., Chicago Bears, Baltimore Ravens, Devin Singletary, Gus Bus Edwards, Dallas Cowboys, Trey Benson, Ezekiel Elliott, Cortland Sutton, Chase Brown, Blake Corum, Jameson Williams, Jerome Ford, F-150, Romeo Dobbs, Tyler Lockett in my pocket, Khalil Shakira, Zach Charbonnet, and J.K. Dobbins, who's quickly becoming a draft riser. Looking at the board here, it suggests that we take Chuba Hubbard. I don't feel like we need a Chuba Hubbard on this team, right? We don't need a guy that's going to be productive for the first couple weeks of the season. We need a guy that could really help win us the league, right? He could maybe be our 3rd flex, or he could be, you know, if something was to happen to McCaffrey or A-Chain, knock on wood, he could be that brand new running back 1 or number 2, right? We don't need to take a safe running back here. And I'm not going to handcuff Javonte Williams with Jaleel McLaughlin, because guess what? If they're both healthy, you're never going to be playing both of them at the same time. So I think we're going to go wide receiver, and then we're going to go with Rico Dowdle. Now, every 5 seconds, there's new news about this backfield. There's news like Rico Dowdle's not going to make the team. And then there's news that Rico Dowdle looks better than Zeke. And there's news that Zeke looks better than Rico Dowdle. It's basically just going in a circle. Zeke didn't look amazing last year. I like him because of his ADP, right? Going in the 9th round, he's a bigger boy. He's built like a wrecking ball. He's going to score touchdowns on a Dallas Cowboys team. That should be pretty good. So that's why you like him, right? But there's also a chance that Rico Dowdle is just better than him, outright better than him. The difference is Rico Dowdle's young, Zeke is ancient, right? But, and this is a big but, shout out to Amadani, I do think that early on it's going to go to Zeke and maybe they transition to Rico Dowdle. So Rico Dowdle's a very high upside pick, so we are going to go with him, but we'll just take him first, actually, because it doesn't matter. I don't care that it's going to tell me, Nick, oh my God, you reached on Rico Dowdle, because that's what it's going to tell me, right? He would have been available to you in the 12th round, right? And then I would have not taken him, and then the 12th round comes back around, and he just wouldn't have been available at all. So then we are going to go with a wide receiver, Jacoby Myers, Curtis Samuel, Joshua Palmer, Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, Magic Mike Williams. I think Mike Williams could come back to us in the next round, but when you are picking from the 1 spot, it's a lot easier, in my opinion, to make your reach, right? Especially when you're back here, just go ahead and draft your guy. For instance, I like Mike Williams. Just fucking take him here because the odds that he comes back to us 8 gazillion picks later is kind of low. Now, I'm not going to tell you to go ahead and reach down for Jalen Polk because as of right now, Jalen Polk doesn't go there. Even though I like Jalen Polk, you could probably get him in the 12th round, whereas I think that there is a chance that Mike Williams doesn't come back to us. So we're going to take him. Mike Williams has been taken off the PUP. Mike Williams was a top 10 receiver in terms of points per game last season when healthy in LA. Now, I understand there's that narrative that, oh, Mike Williams always gets hurt. But if you actually look at Mike Williams' last couple of seasons, he doesn't miss a crazy amount of time. He only played in 3 games last year, 13 the years prior, 16, 15, 15, 16, and 10. I get it. The guy has been hurt in his career, but so has basically everybody. Yeah, rock your body. So I really do think that Mike Williams is a huge steal, the number 2 receiver. Again, I'm not going to sit here and be some Jets fucking fanboy giving the Hawk 2 a special to Aaron Rodgers. But look, if Aaron Rodgers is just 70% of what he was in Green Bay, then this Jets team could win the fucking Super Bowl. Now, I'm going to be praying against that, praying on the downfall of the football gods, the 7 gods from Game of Thrones and House of Dragon. But because I'm a Dolphins fan, but I do think Mike Williams is a huge steal back here in drafts, even though it's going to be like, Nick, you could have gotten it. Actually didn't do it to me. A lot of times FantasyPros just loves to mock me, be like, Nick, you're a fucking idiot. You could have gotten him in the 12th round. Based upon the amount of receivers that went, I probably could have gotten him, but I'm just going to go ahead and get my guy. I think he could miss week 1, but I think more than likely he plays week 1 and they kind of ease him in, right? He's not going full on nuclear. Now, Breece Hall, they said that Mike Williams is on the Breece Hall timeline. Robert Salah, Xerxes from 300 tells us this. And if you remember Breece Hall, he went crazy against the Bills in week 1, but on limited volume. I do feel as though Mike Williams could have a big game in week 1, but it will be on limited volume, so you probably wouldn't want to start him anyways. But again, when you're taking him in the 11th, the 12th round, you don't need to start him anyways. After Mike Williams, Jordan, love me tender, love me sweet, Curtis Samuel, Jake Ferguson, Jerry Judy, Adonai Mitchell, Chuba Hubbard, Jacoby Myers, Kendre Miller, Tyler Algier, Marshawn Lloyd, Big Cock, Brock Purdy, Caleb Williams, Ty Chandler, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Wright from the Dolphins. He had a solid preseason game yesterday. Rashid Shaheed, Damian Pierce, Dallas Goedert, Hawkinson, Bengals, Jets, and Darnell. Here comes the Mooney, who I talked up in yesterday's video. If you haven't seen it, make sure you guys check that out. So currently have 4 running backs, and we have 5 wide receivers. We're going to take another wide receiver here because only finishing with just 5 would be foolish. We're looking to start 4 at all times. And honestly, because of the running back core that we have that I feel pretty confident in, I do feel pretty confident in Williams, Achane, and McCaffrey. Probably going to lead us to drafting 2 more receivers to close out the video. I normally am not, I like Brandon Cooks due to the fact that, unless Jalen Tolbert really breaks out, which seems a little bit more possible now, Brandon Cooks would be the number 2 receiver on an offense that's going to be really solid like the Cowboys. And because we have Dak, that does make me more interested in taking him. But first, we're going to take the layup. We do take Joshua Palmer in a lot of these videos. He is healthy right now, and he did have a solid down the stretch of last season when filling in for Mike Williams as well as Keenan Allen. So I do think that the odds of him being the number 1 wide receiver with Ladd McConkey now banged up feels good, but again, we do have to monitor the health of Justin Herbert, and then we're going to go ahead and draft another wide receiver here. And to be honest with you, the more I hear about Jalen Tolbert does kind of scare me away from Brandon Cooks. Now, you shouldn't really be all that scared, right? I'm not frightened. I'm not shivering down my spine like some spooky, scary skeletons here, thinking about drafting Brandon Cooks because it's in the 13th round, right? You can cut him. You can drop him like it's hot. But I'm going to go for the more upside pick here. And we're going to go ahead here and draft. I think Ricky Pearsall would be a dominant pick here if Ayuk gets traded. But that's an if, right? Because it seems like he might come back. We normally take a Polk here, Demario Douglas, Jahan Dotson, the Brandon Cooks, the Josh Downs, but Josh Downs now hurt. So we're going to take someone different. We're going to go with DeMarcus Robinson. Now, normally you'd be thinking, Nick, in the 13th round, why am I taking the number 3 wide receiver on the LA Rams? Well, interesting tidbit of information. The LA Rams are a team that uses the 3 wide receiver sets at the highest amount. They use 3 wide receivers at all times. DeMarcus Robinson had some very solid outings last season. 15, 13, 14, 20, and 13 points to close out the season. Again, is DeMarcus Robinson going to shatter the mold, Tim Tebow style, right? And become this this alpha wide receiver one on the Rams? The answer to that is no, right? So if you're hunting for a little bit more upside, maybe you want to go ahead and draft a Jalen Polk and Amari Douglas. But again, we've talked about those guys so many times. We've taken them so many times. I'm going to take the guy that is going to be on the field a lot. And if Puka Nacua or Cooper Kupp get hurt, knock on wood, then Demarcus Robinson has that league winner type of upside. I get the guy's been in the NFL for fucking like a decade at this point. I don't know how many years he's played in the NFL again, but he has been in the NFL for a while. Since 2016, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seasons. This is season number 9. Has he always been the best receiver on his team? No, he really never was, but he's not even the best receiver on this team, but I do like the offense in LA. I think they're going to be scoring a lot of points. They're going to be percolating, and I like the upside that Robinson possesses. And again, he also was incredibly safe towards the end of last season. After Demarcus Robinson, hi, my name's Demarcus, Antonio Gibson, Jaleel McLaughlin, and I got a basketball game tomorrow. Khalil Herbert, Elijah Mitchell, Ray Davis, Roshan Johnson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Dalton Schultz, Bucky Irving, Adam Thielen, Cole Kmet, Justin Tucker the Fucker, Pat Freiermuth, Jared Goff, Harrison Bucker, Taysom Hill, Luke Musgrave, Brandon Aubrey, Jake Elliott, AJ Dillon, Xavier, somebody touching my Leggett, and Ron Rodgers. So now we're going to go ahead and draft a kicker and a defense. Jason Sanders looked good for my Dolphins in preseason, so I'm just going to take the highest ranked kicker here. I'm not going to have some conversation at the beginning of August about which kicker is the best, right? I think I'm just going to take him off this. I will have my kicker rankings, though, available in the Patreon, so you guys can know my true feelings, but right now I'm not going to sit here debating one versus the other. Then we want to take a defense. Now, the way you take a defense in fantasy football is by drafting a defense that has a not-so-hot opponent in week number 1. Now, personally, the Steelers, their matchup isn't the easiest, right? They're going up against the Atlanta Falcons, but I do think it's entirely possible that Kirk Cousins coming off that serious injury, and with the Falcons having this whole new scheme around them, they could start off on the wrong foot, right? Instead of going left foot in, they put the right foot out and they do the fucking hokey pokey, right? Maybe they end up sucking ass in week number 1, not looking that great, which is very plausible because they're going up against the Steelers and TJ Watt. Now, the Falcons aren't a great example of an offense that is easy pickings in a way for a defense, but for week number 1, I think it is satisfactory because of how good the Steelers defense are. Guess what? In week 2, if they had play up against a harder team, what you're going to do is drop them and pick up a new defense. The way that you stream defenses is by doing the exact same thing. You go on the waiver wire, you find a defense playing up an offense you don't think is going to be very good that week, and I make videos every single week telling you guys which defenses to stream. Coming up shortly, probably 10-15 days from now, I'm going to drop my defenses to draft video based upon week number 1, and I have a hunch that the Steelers will be included in that. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. We got an A. Chef's kiss, Man U week 94 out of 100, but don't worry too much about your draft grade. It really doesn't matter, but I like this team a lot. Our quarterback was Dak Prescott, running backs McCaffrey and Devon 2 Chains, Chris Olave and Zay Flowers as the wide receiver 1 and 2, Trey McBride as the tight end. Our flexes are Deontay Johnson and Rashee Rice. Our kicker is Jason Sanders. Our defense is the Steelers. Our bench is Rico Dowdle, Javonte Williams, Magic Mike Williams, Joshua Palmer, and Demarcus Robinson. Let me know down below in the comment section what you guys thought about today's mock draft. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let me know in the comment section which picks would you have made a little bit differently. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. Hit that subscribe button down below and hit that like button whether you are new to the channel or not. I love you guys all so much, and we'll be back tomorrow with another banger of a video. Maybe we'll come back a little bit later if Brandon Ayuk gets traded or if he signs, or maybe nothing will happen, which just feels like inevitably gonna happen at this point. Again, check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them. Love you guys. Have a great one. As always, good boy.